Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host Bryan. We're going to continue on with this week's theme, exploring the genre of death metal as a giant umbrella genre. Basically every subgenre is on the table. As y'all know, we started off this week with some proggy death metal, and yesterday we checked out some more straightforward stuff. Anything within the genre is good. Today we're going to be listening to something new, which I think is really cool. I feel like a lot of the stuff I get recommended, especially when we do these genre deep dives, is older stuff. It's the songs that have stood the test of time, that are the thing you want to show people first when they want to get into a genre. And so we don't get too much stuff that's recent, and this track actually came from an album released last year. This is the band Tomb Mold from their 2023 album The Enduring Spirit. Let's check out Will of Whispers. Let's dive in and see what's going on with this. What? Oh, I'm on board. Oh. Yeah, so we have a really nice 3/4 right here. It's interesting just how clear you can hear the vocals in that last section. There's so much clipping going on. And it also sounds a bit dry compared to harsh vocal production I'm used to hearing. It's interesting to hear the juxtaposition between this guitar tone and the one we just had. The rising idea in the guitars. Alright, how was that done? Bringing in some really funky energy after our last more groovier bit. Yeah, the guitars have a real nice sense of musical storytelling. They do show off a little bit in their solos, but they just generally have a great way of pacing out their melody, their lead line. Got that cross stick? Oh man, you don't get further from death metal than this. Such a soothing growl. Oh man, this is magical. Oh. Wonderful bass line under all this. Great atmosphere from both of the guitar lines. Yes. Drummer killing it. I hope they ride this energy to the ends. They kind of are. Alright, there we go. I was not ready for this. Oh, man. I was not ready for that this morning, but I'm so glad I've heard it. And, once again, it's a 2023 album. I don't think I even heard it. I'm real tempted to head into the Discord. When did this come out? Like, what part of 2023? September. Yeah, I'm real tempted to head into the Discord in our new music area and see if this got posted there and maybe figure out why it went under my radar. Maybe this is the only track like that, and so I didn't get a chance to sample it. But if the whole album is like this, I think it's worth a listen. It's only 7 tracks, 40 minutes. Yeah, that's... I might have to listen to this regardless, but I always have regrets about stuff not getting on my album of the year list. There's always music out there. I'm like, I wish I could have heard that so I could highlight it for everyone. But I'm really glad we get this opportunity here, so we get to highlight it anyways. So I don't know that I heard anything more than y'all on this. let's go over this real quick. I love the intro to this. It's a nice little fake out. We have a quick little rock style drum fill to pull us in for beats 3 and 4 as pickup beats into our first bar. I think that's how that worked out. And this first bar is a bit laid back. We have some of those more atmospheric, jazzier, cleaner electric guitar sounds. The bass comes in, and we have this soothing atmosphere, and then this very low, calm, somehow non aggressive growl alongside it. And it is just, there's got to be a word, probably a German word, because they seem to have words for all sorts of unique feelings about that moment. I have two beats of the music telling me one thing, and then this death growl comes in on top of it. And at first I'm like, what? And then it's like a split second. I'm like, ah, that's nice. And I don't have a description for that, like a nice concise vocabulary word to describe that feeling. But it just immediately, slightly immediately makes sense. There is that initial what? But it fades so quickly because it just clicks. It's like, yeah, actually that's real nice. I like that. Soothing death metal. Can we call this smooth death metal? SDM? I dig it. I do. It's such a great way to open this track. From there though, I was a bit underwhelmed possibly because we get 3 or so minutes of fairly straightforward death metal. It's not completely straightforward death metal. We do get these inkling of ideas of something more, but primarily it's driving, groovy riffs and drum patterns with monotonous growling on top of it. It's it's fine for what it is. Straightforward death metal isn't really my jam. I find it just a hair bit too based on repetition and rule of cool groove. I'm good for a reaction, right? I can just get into that groove and jam along with it, move my body, nod my head, whatever. But it's not something I'm going to actively seek out, especially for a full-length album. It's just, it's not my cup of tea. I can appreciate it in small bursts. And so we get this, I'm like, okay, this is cool, I'm jamming with it. The riffs are pretty good. I'm not usually a riff guy. There's some riffs that just stand out. I'm like, that's a sick riff right there. These are fine. They're serviceable. They get the groove going. It sounds cool. It's got that energy in the bite. But a couple of things I noticed in this section already is that the guitars are produced a bit cleaner. They still have that large width, that rawness, the clipping from the overdrive and the extra distortion put on top of it from the compression. They have this meatiness, but it's not quite as blown out as I associate with the genre. And that's when I started to notice the vocals as well are a bit rawer, a bit drier than I would expect. When we talk about wet versus dry in production, it means how much of it is the original recording, which would be dry, and how much of it is the effects that you're putting on it, your EQs, your compressions, if you're using auto tune or pitch correction or anything, how many layers do you have on it, right? We use the term wet for applying the effects and dry for having the original sound, and this is actually kind of dry. There were a couple moments when most of the instruments, maybe all the instruments cut out, and we really got to hear the vocals themselves. And honestly, it sounded like just the dude growling into a microphone. It even had a little bit of compression on it that might have been done afterwards, but also sounds like what this mic sounds like before I put any effects on it. And I do put a lot of effects on it because it is a very cheap mic and it does not sound great by default. And that's kind of what I hear here. It's sort of compressed, it's not as full bodied, it's missing some color to it. It sounds like it was just recorded straight on a cheap mic. And I find that really interesting because to me, many of the best death metal growls have production on them. There's a lot of elements that go into creating that sound. 70-80% of it is the vocalist. I don't want to take any of that away from the skill that goes into mastering the technique of harsh vocals. But just like clean vocals, there's ways to amplify and hone and sharpen the sound into something that sounds, in this case, these probably aren't the terms you would want for clean vocals, but harsher, heavier, meatier, thicker, to really get that death metal element in it to match what the guitars are doing. Here it doesn't feel like they went that way because the guitars are also lighter and thinner than I would expect. It kind of blew me away. And I have this thing where I keep trying to find completely dry, harsh vocals. And it's really hard to find because there's production on, everything. But yeah, I guess let me put this request out there. If anybody has YouTube videos of completely dry vocals, harsh vocals, any style, shrieks, growls, your metalcore, your modern metalcore, harsh vocal, whatever, hit me up with those links. I just want to hear what they sound like because I'm real curious about that. How much the effects alter it is what I'm aiming for. Um, but yeah, so like there's these little oddities in this death metal section that make it feel distinct from many of the other sounds and bands that we check out in this genre. And there's a reason for that, of course, is because this isn't just straightforward death metal. It's proggy. I don't know if I necessarily want to call it prog death metal, but it has tendencies to take this death metal foundation and push past it. Throughout our opening 3 minutes, not only is the guitar tone a little lighter and thinner than I would expect for the genre, but they do explore some ideas outside of death metal. The guitar solos do have a bit of shred to them, but they're very melodic. They're very laid back. There are a couple of moments of shred. We have that, what I think was a really fast hammer-on pull-off mixed with tremolo picking thing going on in our second solo, I think it was. I asked y'all, I was like, how did he do that? That's my guess right there. Because it was just really quick between what sounded like two notes. But, we have these faster, shreddier moments, but when you really look at how the melodies are crafted, they're well paced. There's moments of hold, of pause to create anticipation for what comes next. The ideas tend to start in one place and swell into another idea, sometimes ending there, sometimes dropping back down, creating just a really nice rise of intensity and an ending to that story, like a little short poem in the middle of a short story. But there's also some jazzier melodic ideas that get tossed in here. We have some harmonies that I would say are jazz oriented that we hear a couple of times. A lot of this is done in the death metal sound as far as guitar work, but they do bring in some jazzier chords here and there, and it just perks my ears up. Oh, that was tasty. What were they aiming for with that? I think a lot of it is just to set up what they're going to explore later. And of course, around the 3 or 4 minute mark, I don't remember where, somewhere in the middle, we return back to the sound of the intro, this atmospheric, laid back, jazzy tone. And I love it. I love it so much. These guys are so talented to swing. Like I had mentioned there, you really don't get that. You really don't get much further from death metal than smooth jazz. And the fact that they have both sides of this spectrum completely under their belt, they feel so comfortable in both sides, is fantastic. Normally, in a section like this, we have the drums reining it in quite a bit, even getting off of the full-bodied snare for a cross-stick sound instead. The bass comes in with these beautiful walking bass lines and wonderful punctuating ideas, usually a nice 8th or 16th note run at the end of a phrase. The guitar just has these gorgeous melodies being played with some jazzier harmonies. There's two guitars going on, one's doing harmony, one's doing melody. Normally I would ask for the vocals to accommodate the style. And the more I listen to the growling on top of this, the more I really like it. It's interesting because it is monotonous. It definitely becomes a texture more than anything rhythmic or melodic. It's everything I dislike about growls in general, and yet it just absolutely works for me in this context. It's, like I mentioned at the beginning, it really shouldn't work, but it does. It is the most soothing growl I have ever heard. I think part of that is the delivery. The air pressure is still solid, but it feels like a quiet growl. I think a lot of this comes from having a drier recording as well, using a drier vocal element for this section rather than something a bit more produced and more deathy. It allows him to go for a quieter sound and for that to be conveyed through the production into the, what we hear in the final mix down. But also when you pair it against the music, I don't know, it's like the quietness comes through and it becomes soothing. It's a lullaby growl. How does that work? Does anybody else get that feeling? The music comes in, it's chill, it's laid back. I'm grooving to it, and then he growls, and I'm like, yeah, I could take a nap right now. You want to keep that growling going? I'm just gonna duck out, get a couple Z's. I've never had growling feel soothing, like an overlapping warmth around me. It's bizarre, but it works, and I can't explain it. Um, Toward the end of this, though, we did have some rising intensity. I really liked where they were going, and I knew we had like 70 seconds left, and I said something along the lines of, I hope they ride this out to the end. They kind of do. They take it back to a more metal-oriented sound as far as production goes. The guitar tones, the growl, all of it kind of goes back towards a metalier sound, but we continue to use the composition techniques that they established in the jazzy section. It's sort of a best of both worlds area while also directly using some of the melodies we had just listened to. So we've moved on to a new metal section, but it feels like a continuation of where we were, an expansion of those same ideas. And we explore this for a little bit with the guitars continuing to utilize an even lighter distorted tone and those jazzier ideas, which is really important because distortion is really going to mess with unstable or unbalanced chords. There's a reason why the power chord took off the way it did with rock and metal. It's because the power chord it's extremely stable. It is the root and the octave. They're the exact same note, so those wavelengths line up perfectly. And then the fifth, and the root to the fifth is the most stable note interval you can have outside of the octave. And so when you add distortion to it, it's still going to sound stable. The more spicy you're going to make your chords, the more the distortion is going to make it sound warbly and gnarly. And it's why we can make really gnarly dissonance in metal with metal guitar tones. It amplifies any of the clashing that the wavelengths have. So when you decide to play some jazzier ideas, some spicier chords, stuff that's a bit less balanced, you really need to back the distortion off or it's going to sound disgusting. And you can certainly, if you want to lean into that for sure, you want to make a gnarly guitar riff, um, go for it. This is how you do it. Crank up that distortion and hit some dissonant tones. But for this, where they're aiming for beauty, when they take those jazzier ideas and put them on distorted guitars, they got to back that distortion off even more because the notes are less stable together. The chords are less stable. And so they do. The guitar tones here at the very end don't have as much punch as we did at the beginning, even though they're meatier, more distorted, heavier than they were in the jazzier section. But then we lighten it back off again as a sort of denouement after we've hit this secondary false shelf, this false climax, bring it back down entirely, and it's just a really great way to wrap the track up. Phenomenal stuff. I gotta check this out. If anyone's listened to this album, which I assume at least one person has since it was requested, is the whole album like this? It doesn't even necessarily need to be jazz and death metal, but do they just explore really cool combinations like this? And are there more soothing sections? Because if so, I gotta get in on this. Just a phenomenal introduction to this band. Let me hit some lyrics. Oh man, death metal lyrics always make my stomach drop. I'm just like, oh geez, I gotta listen to death metal lyrics. But maybe this one's gonna be a bit more, I don't know if positive's the right word, but a bit less grotesque. Although Opeth was alright. Opeth was alright. Let's dive in and see what's going on. Alright, I am all sorts of lost on this, but I'm picking up some ideas here and there. It starts off, it says, every word primes the nerves. They dissolve our euphoric cluster. We are at each other's mercy, but what pushes you onward? Our roots coil and ripen, and the believing heart opens all doors. Those fixed in their years quietly wait for all to disappear. This right here, to me, speaks about connection, human connection. It says we are at each other's mercy. Our roots coil and ripen, and the believing heart opens all doors. The idea of opening yourself up to others. Those fixed in their years, the ones who are immobile, who refuse to expand their horizons, who refuse to grow as people, says they quietly wait for all to disappear. They want everything gone. It's just a life of nothingness. That's what this opening tells me. I don't know if anything else in here leans into that, so I probably have the wrong read on it. But that's what I'm getting out of this opening element. The rest, I don't know. There's some really cool lines in here, though. It says, time without haste, patience without release, you light your way to sorrow. I really like that. It speaks about the necessity for some of the things that people tend to find uncomfortable. For time to be this thing that weighs down on you. Yeah, for the most part, that kind of sucks, but without that, there sort of isn't much to the concept of time. It helps us count things down, sort of by definition. As the seconds pass, as the days go on, as the years continue to press forward, time has this idea of dragging us, whether we want to or not, into the future, one step closer to whatever. One step closer to the next positive thing, one step closer to the inevitable. Patience without release. Patience is certainly a virtue, but if you just continue to be patient and you never take action, always in the wait, once again, a life not worth lived. He states, you light your way to sorrow. I really like this stanza too. It says, underneath the greater beauty and aura is where the truth begins. Experience both its calm and storm. I love that, especially in context of the track, which a calm and a storm is certainly what the song brings. The death metal elements at the beginning of the track are the storm, but there's also a calm when they bring in the jazzier parts, and we do get to experience both simultaneously for a brief moment there right before the outro. But it's also just a really great line in and of itself. The truth can bring calm. The truth can also be devastating. And in order for life to be well lived, you need to experience both. You can find this truth beneath the greater beauty and aura. That tells me that this truth is a higher truth. It isn't just any truth. It is something a bit more cosmic, maybe a bit more universal to life. But I'm not quite sure. The very last stanza is one that confuses me the most, as I like the first couple of lines, but the last one throws a huge wrench into any understanding I have because it seems like a non sequitur. The stanza says, all are allowed their secrets, all are allowed their spirits, their solace, their sorrow. But who will remove the blade from between my eyes? And I think if I understood everything else in this track, that last line might make a bit more sense, to take these philosophical concepts and to trace them down to this idea of murder. But I don't think I get the rest of the song enough to understand that line. I think it's supposed to be this revelatory element, and it's just completely lost on me. But overall, this was nice lyrically and musically. I quite enjoyed myself. As far as death metal goes, this is one of the ones that are higher up there on my list, and like I said, I gotta go check them out. Those are my thoughts on Tomb Mold. It's really hard to say that properly without having that pause between it, because otherwise I will just slur it together and take the M from the end of tomb and kind of get rid of that soft B sound and move it right into mold. Tomb Mold. That is what my southern stuff wants to do. And so yeah, I have to pause myself. Tomb Mold. It's got a rhythm to it. Anyways, their track, Will of Whispers, those are my thoughts. Let me know yours down in the comment section. Give me your thoughts, comments, opinions, perspectives, anything you'd like to add to the discussion, anything you'd like to add to the discussion, anything you'd like to correct me on, or anything like that. Let me know. Above that, in the description box, you'll find a link to Linktree. It takes you here. You can find links to my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. There's a lot of cool stuff in there. Go ahead and check it out. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three of those. We do have a special selection, I think, up next. We have another video, whatever it ends up being. Otherwise, I'll be back tomorrow, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 p.m. UTC. As usual, we're going to continue on with Death Metal Week. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.